Singing Dutchman Productions. Hello and welcome to Doug's Front Porch, a podcast where I get to sit down with friends old and new and have honest conversations. Today I welcome Eve Allen to the front porch, someone that I'm meeting for the first time today in our conversation, but I'll tell you guys here in a minute how we've gotten to be connected. But Eve, welcome to the front porch.
Thank you so much, Doug. I'm thrilled to be here.
That's great. So, for fans of the show or people that listen to the show, maybe you remember Eve's uncle, Brad Blymeyer, who was a guest way back in season 1, episode 31, reached out to me not too long and said, I had to have you on as a guest because of tons of things. And I said, well, I value your opinion, Brad, so highly that I was like, absolutely. His quote to me, actually, Eve, was, Eve is an academic powerhouse of a person. So we're gonna have to unpack that a little bit, but I'm so excited to have you on the show. I start every episode the same way, just so that our audience can kind of get to know a little bit about who I'm interviewing. Could you tell us about where did you grow up? What kind of things was young Eve involved in? Were you a music kid? Were you sports? Were you outside all the time? Just to give our audience a little bit of background on what young Eve was like.
Yes, so I grew up in Adams County, Pennsylvania, so South Central, in a very small town called Abbottstown. And I grew up on 14 acres with a very large field, and the perimeter of that property was lined with forest, and there was a tributary of the Susquehanna River, the Conewago Creek, that ran through the property. And I was homeschooled until I was about 12 years old. And so the young Eve was outside playing all 4 seasons. We didn't really we had a television and we would only get channels on Saturday morning. So the rest of the week, I was out. I'm the oldest of four. And at that time, I had two younger brothers. My younger sister didn't come until I was 11. And so, yeah, we played outside all the time. And I'm really grateful actually for that childhood.
I, yeah, I think I wish more of, so as the audience knows, I teach high school. I wish more of my high school students could have had that experience growing up. I think it would change some things for sure. I grew up outside all the time too on our family farm, and I know the value of it. And everyone, as we continue into this conversation, you'll quickly realize how important I think that childhood experience was for Eve as she took that and moved professionally in her career as she got older, which we'll segue into. But so you were homeschooled for a while, then I guess you eventually went into public ed or private ed of some kind, got through high school, and I know you went on to college. Could you talk about that? Where'd you go to study? What did you study?
Yeah, so I was homeschooled until I was 12. I went to a private Christian school for a year. My parents were not sure how I would acclimate to a more social setting, but I did extremely well. I was really excited to have the structure and more rigor with my education. And I went to New Oxford High School after the private Christian school. I did 4 years there. And when I graduated, I wanted to go to college, but I wasn't exactly sure how to get there. I am a first generation college student, although my uncle Brad went to college, so he was a really great example for me as somebody close to me that could model what it looked like going to college. So I knew I wanted to go to college, but my parents didn't really set aside money for me, and I didn't have that guidance even at New Oxford High School. Like they said, why don't you start at a community college here locally? And I love Pennsylvania. I really grew to appreciate where I came from, and that came actually after pretty extensive travel. But at the time, I was 17 and I wanted to leave. I wanted to get out and see the world. And I saved up money working my senior year and moved to New York City when I was 18. And I took a gap year, I mean, I had to because I didn't really have a plan, but I then entered into a community college in Lower Manhattan. actually 5 minutes from where I was living, so it was very convenient. And I started out there just getting prerequisites for an associate's degree in liberal arts. And what I really appreciated about that experience was I was able to do a lot of my prerequisite courses through an asynchronous learning format. That was like the original Zoom school, except, we didn't really have kind of like the live classes. You more just did your work independently and then checked in with your teacher over email. So I took about, I would say, 70% of my courses through that format. And then I traveled with my partner, who's now my husband, and he and I cumulatively traveled for 2 years doing work away experiences, work exchange experiences. So we traveled through 12 different countries and we were gone pretty long stretches of time, 3 to 4, 5 months, 6 months at a time. So I did my undergrad, half of it that way. And that first part of my undergrad really informed what I wanted to study. It shaped the kind of course that I wanted, the things I wanted to learn, which was really about agriculture, sustainable agriculture. So I came back and I was like, all right, now it's time to find a brick and mortar college to transfer. And I went to a small liberal arts college in Western Massachusetts called Hampshire College, which is quite an experimental university where you're not pigeonholed into selecting a major. You can choose really the topics that you're passionate about and that you are interested in. And that really worked with me because as somebody that was homeschooled, I'm very self-directed and self-motivated and I love learning. And, my whole academic trajectory has been following the things that I'm really interested in, that I can't, I'm like, no amount of learning about this will satiate my thirst, I just want to keep learning. So I appreciated that opportunity because there were really no guardrails. I could study anything that I wanted and I could combine different disciplines and topics, and I did just that. So I ended up studying crop wild relative conservation as it relates to sustainable agriculture, and we can talk more about that later. Um, yeah, so I don't know. I don't know if we want to keep going into my master's, but
Well, I
um,
guess we could say that you then went on to grad school. And what's your terminal degree? Do you have your doctorate now, or just your master's?
I have my master's, and I'm actually November 15th, I'm applying for a PhD program. So fingers crossed,
Yeah, absolutely,
I will be
absolutely.
next year this time starting a doctorate program.
And what are you looking? What was your master's degree in then? So we talked about how at Hampshire College you kind of had like a little bit of a flow. You could do this, you could study this, but when you get to grad level, you got to lock into something. So what is your master's degree in?
Yeah, well, so actually, I had a really wonderful master's experience too, because after the Hampshire experience, I was like, I don't want to get locked in again. Like, and I sought programs that allowed me to be quite interdisciplinary. And so there was a really great experience in between my undergrad and master's where I went on Fulbright for a year to Peru and I worked with smallholder Quechua farmers in the high Andes. And that experience, it was really, focused on agriculture, but it kind of broadened my perspective to think more about environmental, like land use planning. And so I knew I wanted to do something that had more of a spatial element to it and more of a plant, like a spatial planning element. So I started looking at planning programs and I found a master's in city planning at MIT. And I, learned about how this degree, there's very few prerequisite courses. And then, the rest of the degree, you could study whatever you want, do whatever you want. And so I was very fortunate to be accepted into that program. It's highly competitive. And, being at MIT was a phenomenal experience. It's such a rich institution. And it was challenging because I entered fall 2020, 2019. And
Oh,
then after I kind of got through that learning curve of being back in school again, the pandemic broke out. So I actually took a year off because I was like, okay, I just got here and I don't want to finish my grad degree doing a Zoom school. And that was great because that year I took off, I got an internship, and that internship actually is the job that I'm in professionally today. So that worked out really nicely. Um, and yeah, so I have a master's in city planning, but I really studied environmental, like regional environmental planning, and I kind of pivoted from agriculture more into ecological restoration and the healing of degraded, damaged, and destroyed landscapes. And I really focus here in the Northeast, like Virginia, all the way up to Maine. And I focus on supply chain logistics for native plants, um, seeds and plants of native flora, which are right now there's very little commercial availability of the plants that we need to do projects like reforestation or wetland rehabilitation or, making our coastlines more resilient to sea level rise through, replanting dune grass. It's hard to find those plants that we need.
Well, that Eve, that's perfect because you segued right into what I wanted to talk about next. And as Eve's been talking about this, just to let everybody know, she is currently the program director for the Northeast Bioregion at the Ecological Health Network. And according to her LinkedIn profile, this is where I work on improving the supply of native seeds, like she was just talking about, and plants to support ecological restoration. Now, if you had to unpack that to somebody that doesn't necessarily understand or know what you do, how would you describe what you're doing to somebody that does not have any background in any of the stuff that you're doing?
Okay, so I'm going to give us a case study example to focus in on,
Okay.
one that's relevant and happening right now in New York State. So in New York, there's a lot of agricultural land that's out of production, maybe for various reasons. The farmers, it's not economically viable for them to farm any longer, or the soil has gone fallow and the soil viability isn't great. And so they're thinking about other ways to manage and use that land. And, 400 years ago, that land was actually forest. So people are thinking, why don't we plant trees on this abandoned agricultural land to help sequester carbon? Because the state has carbon neutrality targets that it would like to achieve. So there's a lot of land, actually 1.7 million acres in New York State that could be planted with trees to grow new forests. But there's a problem. There's not enough baby tree saplings available at nurseries to do large scale planting like that. So part of the work that I've been doing is trying to figure out, well, how do we stimulate a supply chain? How do we, strengthen the nursery infrastructure that we already have? How do we bring more people together that focus on this and, figure out where all of the bottlenecks are across this supply chain and then how we can generate solutions to fix those bottlenecks so we can actually produce more baby tree saplings and those can go out and get planted and we can restore forests.
One logistic question, just sitting here thinking about this, when in a situation like this where you have farmers that have this land, but for whatever reason they no longer can farm it, and you guys come in or organizations like yours come in and suggest, hey, why don't we could forest this again or reforest it? How are you the person having that conversation with the landowner, or is that somebody else? And how does, if you know, like, how do those conversations go? I could imagine that some landowners might feel intruded upon if somebody comes in having suggestions on how they could use their land. I know most farmers are good stewards of the land, and they know the value of soil and all that. But I could also imagine that in this day and age that might be a difficult conversation with some landowners to have. So, do you know how that process works?
So I don't because I work with the Nature Conservancy, the New York chapter, and a host of other people that are either restoration practitioners or botanists, ecologists, nursery professionals. I don't have very many direct connections to the landowners, but landowner willingness to reforest their land is very important. And the Nature Conservancy did a stakeholder survey to understand how receptive landowners would be to planting trees on their agricultural land. And so they're really only focusing on areas where they already know that landowners
Okay.
give to that. And
So, so through your studies and through this work that you're doing, I guess I mean this is the $1 million question. Have you guys figured out how to get more saplings created?
well, so one of the projects, so how I've, entered, like I do a lot with the supply chain, also herbaceous species like grasses and wildflowers for pollinators. Like, so I work on that as well. The tree saplings, how I'm engaged with that is that one of the first things you need to do is focus on a subset of species that both those who are planting the trees, to the restoration practitioners or the land managers, and then those who are producing the plant material, the nursery professionals, that they can both agree that this is the subset of species that we want to prioritize for commercial production and for tree planting. And so since February of this year, I've been working with the Nature Conservancy and a host of many different, very um, great experts that really sit across the arc of this tree seed supply chain. And I've been leading a project to prioritize tree species in New York State. So we started out looking at, how many tree species exist in the state, which is about like 130, 140, depending on how you define a tree versus a shrub. Um, and then from there, we created uh, a collaborative framework for identifying and prioritizing which tree species had really great environmental, ecological, economic, and cultural value. And we kind of winnowed down that list to about 40 top species. And so that now is technical guidance that producers can use that can guide them to, which to species and trees where they can collect the seed and start scaling up production. So it's a very long process. It needs, a lot of investment. A lot of this work is really within the realm of the public good because you don't really have that market return, so it doesn't attract investments like other sectors do. But we've gotten a lot of money also recently from the Biden administration, and there's a lot of grants that have helped to stimulate this work. And there's, a real need for more restoration and more healing of our damaged landscapes, and people are aware of this. And so, at a national level, a global level, of course, and now regionally and at the state level, there's a lot of people working on this. So that's also encouraging.
Sure. One thing I was thinking of while you're talking about that, and you're looking at all these species of trees that you're potentially trying to get to a list of these are the 10 or whatever that we want to do. Are you also taking into effect or into account maybe species that are endangered? The big talk right now among that I read a lot is like bringing back the American chestnut, for example, this tree that once covered the whole eastern seaboard of the United or most of the eastern seaboard. Are there certain like is that something you take into account too? Like we want we're looking specifically for trees that were always here, those truly native species that maybe aren't as beloved or as well known as maybe like the typical hemlock or the Douglas fir or something like that or the maple tree. That I mean, does that come into the conversation as well?
Oh, yes. And I should have clarified that with this analysis that we did, we started off with only trees that are native to New York State. Um, But within that, we did consider some tree species that could be near natives. So they might be native in Pennsylvania and their ranges are shifting northward with climate change. But actually those didn't score as high when we aggregated the score across all of our different metrics. Um, But one of, the categories that was of big concern for us was trees that have forest health concerns. So ash, elm, beech, and because they have a high mortality rate after they're planted, it was important for us to not necessarily remove those species completely from the list. I mean, in our top 30, we did because it's, not worth recommending to plant a tree that, only might die 5 years or less after planting it. Um, but but those trees are, very culturally important, and there are many people working on disease-resistant stock or, new pesticides to help, you know, heal well, treat what the affliction is. So maybe in the future, those trees could come back on the landscape. I know there's a lot of work being done with American chestnut. I've even seen some small, uh, like field experiment sites where they have either some transgenic American chestnut or some natural, I think artificially selected resistant stock. It's really, it's small and people are trying, but I don't really know too much about that. But
Yeah, right. I know that that's one that at least here in Pennsylvania we see more and more about, like in the social media news feed and things like that. It often comes up about the American chestnut because it played such a huge role here in Pennsylvania,
Mhm.
which today, none of us alive are even have no contact with this tree that at one point was all that was around. So I hope that becomes continues to be a success story and we can bring that tree back. I think that would be great. The work you're doing is unbelievable, and it's work that probably a lot of Americans have no idea is going on. And that's why I'm really glad that I want to kind of switch this next thing. You run a blog called Cultivate the Wild, and just to let everyone know, and this is taken from Eve's website. Cultivate the Wild is a blog that explores the reciprocal relationships between people, plants, and ecosystems through multimedia storytelling. Now, I have some questions for you, Eve. Why do you say stories about people, plants, and ecosystems? Why do you feel that through storytelling you can get your message across to people?
Well, I mean, storytelling is such a compelling form of communication. It's the oldest form of communication. Everybody loves a good story. They love a plot, they love people in that plot doing things. It engages them, it makes it interesting to learn about new topics. So, I think it's for me a way to, hone in on an effective way to communicate about things that I really love. So that's why.
Can you give us an example of a recent post or a post that you've written that you've gotten a lot of feedback for that you didn't think maybe, here's this topic that I'm really interested. I wonder if my readers will be too. Do you have something off the top of your head? I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but something that's memorable that sticks in your mind that, oh, that blog post really hit a chord with a lot of people?
That's a good question. I would say my blog is, I've had it for a few years and I slowly put stories up. I want to be more active, but I'm so preoccupied in professional life that when I have little slivers of time, I try to work on my blog posts. I actually just posted something about 2 weeks ago, not even. I was in Croatia this summer and I got to visit a 2,500-year-old olive tree, which was a beautiful experience. So I wrote a little post about that. Um, but yeah, I wrote a blog actually for another a post for another blog that my organization helps to curate, and I kind of copied it and put the images and the drone footage on my blog. And I got a lot of positive feedback from that one. And that was about the restoration of grasslands in the southeast of the United States. And there's some, yeah, really cool drone footage of these beautiful grassland habitats. But yeah, the blog is, a place I do a lot of traveling and a lot of exploration, and it's, a place for me to also, write about that and share videos and footage. and images so that I can also remember.
Where you've been and what you saw.
Well, you know, I just feel like sometimes I have these experiences that are so rich and so deep, and if I don't do my best to write about it and take photos and images, the memory you can just lose all of that richness so quickly, and they're really precious memories to me. I don't want them to erode. So, yeah, this is one way to try to preserve that for myself as well.
When Eve says she's done a lot of traveling, she's not lying. I'm just looking through some of her stuff online. You've been all over the world, and you told us this story about what you're doing in upstate New York. And as you've traveled to these other countries, well, it's Croatia, looking at that 2,500-year olive tree, or somewhere in South America, like you said, in Peru. Do you find that a lot of our other countries out there are also starting to, or maybe they've been doing it, maybe they're better at it than us, in regards to taking the same approach to rehabilitate, to rejuvenate, to maintain the earth in those regions? Are they, are you finding that to be the case?
Yes, and my organization, the Ecological Health Network, we actually help. We're working right now on creating a global network of restoration sites around the world. And so I haven't been to all of those restoration sites, but through working there, I've become acquainted with a lot of excellent restoration programs and activities in nearly every continent on the earth. And so I would say there is so much movement, so many people want to figure out how to heal our degraded ecosystems. And just, to throw some statistics up, it's about, 75% right now of terrestrial ecosystems on our planet are severely degraded. And if we
75%.
and if we don't correct our course, that will go up to about 90% by 2050. We're at risk of over 1 million species becoming extinct within a few decades, and also our aquatic ecosystems are in peril as well. Um, and we have a lot of people on this planet, so it's not just about setting apart large tracts of land and letting them rewild. I mean, some people hear that idea of rewild, but that's not what we're talking about here. We don't really like to use that word because we feel that it it puts number one people apart from nature, and it doesn't really show that there's an active role for people in helping to steward and heal landscapes. And from the indigenous perspective, um, it also erases the fact that indigenous people on our continent, for example, have been here for 15,000 plus years stewarding and caretaking ecosystems. So yeah, we have a lot of work to do, and a lot of people have rolled up their sleeves and they're getting to work. And I think, one of the challenges is that we are evolutionarily hardwired to want to gravitate towards negative things. And so our news feeds, our social media feeds, all you hear is doom and gloom. You don't have to look far to start to have an existential crisis about the state of our world. Um, but that's really, I think biased because you're only getting a collection of data points and you don't see the full picture. Even this past 2 years, my work just reading grant proposals, learning about what people are doing in my region in Pennsylvania, just in Pennsylvania, for example, I'm so filled with a sense of optimism for the future because people are working hard. They're working hard to restore our soil, to restore plant populations, to bring back our pollinators, which is incredibly important for agricultural production, to restore our forests, to clean our water, to remediate polluted lands. And there's real human health and well-being benefits. And that's also what my organization focuses on, is that intersection: healthy ecosystems, healthy people. So, this is all connected. And yeah, I would say not just here regionally, but globally, there's a huge amount of work being done.
Yeah. So in all your travels, I'm going to put you on the spot. Outside of the United States, what country is doing this work really well, in your opinion? So to the places that you've been, anyway.
Okay, so let's see. There's this is a tricky question because I know, for example, that people are doing really excellent work restoring the Atlantic forest in Brazil, but I have not yet been to Brazil to see that. Um, I was in Costa Rica last year, and Costa Rica is a great example of forest restoration. They had, I think, less than 50% of their forests in the 80s, and now they've restored that nearly, upwards of 80-90%. So they brought their forests back very quickly. That's a very inspiring story, and that was really done through the government, through great policy. I am about to embark on a trip to Australia and New Zealand in March, where they have a lot of restoration going on there. That will be a work trip for me. And because Australia has incredible biodiversity, and they also have a mining industry as well. And that mining sector has stimulated a lot of restoration. So, I know that they have I think, a very sophisticated approach to restoring ecosystems. So I'm really excited to go there and to learn more. Um, I have to say, I'm a big fan of how Europe does land use planning. I think the public transportation, the train system, the kind of smaller footprint, and a lot of that is, you know, it's historical, but I think they still do a very good job of maintaining cultural landscapes that work really well for people. Um, there's not a lot of kind of wild, not to use that term because it is kind of problematic, but there's not a ton of wild nature left in Europe because those landscapes have been so managed by humans for so long. But, I appreciate being on the European continent because of the land use planning.
Let me ask you this question too, and this is a deep philosophical one. In all of you've been doing this now your whole life, essentially working with these types of ideas and thoughts, and you've traveled. And I'm going to ask you this question: what knowledge have we lost that our ancestors knew or understood, in your opinion, when it comes to this topic?
Hmm. You know, that's a very deep question. I feel like I need more time to reflect on that. I would say though, I've when I was in Peru and I was able to live with indigenous Quechua smallholder farmers for 9 months, that experience transformed my life and really enriched my worldview. And partly was because in their religion, in their cosmovision, they are highly um let's see they really believe in animism, so that the rivers are alive, the mountains are alive, they're imbued with spirit. They pray to the mountains, they pray to Pachamama, Mother Earth. um all of the agricultural crops are revered. The potato, which was what I was studying, the wild potato, is called Machu Papa, which means like old respected grandfather potato, Machu Picchu, old respected mountain. So I think there's like a deep respect and admiration for the natural world. And I don't know if my ancestors from Pennsylvania and before that from Germany and Scotland and Ireland felt that as well, but I imagine some of them most definitely did. So I think that love for the natural world and the understanding that, we are completely reliant on the biosphere, um, maybe is something that we don't think about collectively as a human society as much as maybe we should.
Yeah. I think also from an educational perspective, and I think back, I've been teaching now for 20 some years, and I think about what I was learning about in elementary school and what our elementary students are learning today, and you do see more of a focus on this whole interconnectedness and how biodiversity and how the ecological system, how it directly affects each person. I think for a couple generations we didn't talk about that maybe, or we didn't focus on it, but that's changing. So I think as some of these younger Americans grow up and they're at least exposed to these ideas, and of course thinking like nowadays with social media, I'm sure that there are tons of organizations like yours out there that are on TikTok, that are on Instagram, that are on these social media feeds, putting videos, putting stuff out, content out there that people can consume and learn about, the indigenous people in Peru and how they value the earth, or this reforestation of upstate New York, where 25 years ago, if that stuff was going on, how would anybody ever have known? So just the ability, going back to storytelling, which is so vital and so valuable. I agree with you 100% on that. I think that you guys, your organization and other organizations like yours, have the ability now better than ever to tell those stories, to get people to care, and to get people to understand just how interconnected everything is and how that directly affects them. And like you said, as soon as someone realizes that it directly affects them, they're going to care a little bit more than if they felt completely disconnected from it.
Mhm.
So having said that, your organization, I'm sure, is online, but if somebody wanted to learn more about the work that you do, or they wanted to donate to these reforestation programs or anything like that, what is the best avenue for someone to get involved that way? Maybe not, boots on the ground, but they'd like to financially support or just learn more. What do you recommend to anyone listening to this episode?
Well, you can definitely go to our website, ehnglobal.org, and that is a great way to learn more about what we're doing here in the Northeast and also globally. And we do accept charitable donations because we are a 501(c)(3). Um, we also, one of the programs that I have and that I've been deeply engaged in for the past 2 years that actually came out of my master's thesis research at MIT is the development of something called the Northeast Seed Network. And so that's a new collaborative partnership that I currently coordinate, and it's becoming its own entity. We kind of incubated it, and now it's grown to a point where um, it's going to stand on its own 2 feet, which is exciting. And we have a new website that's coming online that's going to be the northeastseednetwork.org. So you can check that out. And, if you're engaged in, even planting wildflowers or native plants in your front yard, and you want to learn more about who might be growing, um, native plants that you can buy at a nursery, or you want to get seed, that's a great place for you to check out, especially if you're in Pennsylvania. We work with a lot of great producers in Pennsylvania. Um, and we have lots of cool things too happening through that network. Like we are really working on building a seed supply for converting turf grass into native lawns, which are much better for pollinators and take a lot less, resources. And we'll be accepting charitable donations for the Northeast Seed Network as well.
Well, I will link some of those things in the show notes. So everybody that's listening, and if you're watching this on YouTube or whatever, you can check out the show notes and check out and learn more. I will just say from my own personal, so I did grow up on a farm, as everybody knows, I think, listening to the show, and the value of land and the connectedness to land was something that was instilled in me as a child and still to this day. And I have tons of flowers and a lot of things outside around my house. And the ones that always get the most comments from visitors or from neighbors, it tends to be the native plants and the wildflowers that I grow. And I always say the same thing. They're the easiest to grow because this is where they're supposed to grow. I'm not having to feed them extra food. I'm not having to, take gentle care with them. So I echo your sentiments about everyone can do this. Everyone can take part. And it's as simple as buying a wildflower seed mix or going to your local extension office here in Pennsylvania and finding out what is native to here, what should I be growing to help pollinators, etc. We can all do our part. We might not all be able to go plant a million trees in upstate New York, but it's easy to scatter some wildflower seeds in your flower beds or along your fence row or to attract pollinators, and that's just all part of the big system. So I want to echo everything you said. Even I want to congratulate you for the work that you're doing. It's work that a lot of people probably don't have any realization is taking place, but it's vital to, I mean, everything we talked about today. we're talking about the future. I mean, if this work isn't done, the future is going to look different than how we hope it can look, and hopefully extend our future even longer if than if we don't do the work now. So thank you for you and to your organizations that you work with, for telling these stories. Like I said, everybody, I'm going to link Eve's stuff there that you can check out, her blog, and also the place where she works, so that you can learn more about this process. But we're done talking shop. Eve, it was wonderful. It was a really fascinating conversation, and I'll be following along to see the progress that you guys make, especially up something as close as upstate New York for me here in Pennsylvania. But that's it's not that far away. We can physically drive and see the results of some of this stuff. But I always end every conversation with 10 quick questions to all my guests that really have nothing to do with anything we talked about. It's just an opportunity for my listeners to get to know Eve a little bit better. So here come your 10 quick questions, Eve. Are you ready? She's grinning. Yeah, she's ready. Okay, here we go. Question number 1. What is your morning drink of choice?
I like drinking matcha tea. I learned drinking matcha in Japan and it stuck with me. I
Okay.
also oolong tea.
Okay. So not a coffee drinker.
Nope.
It's okay. All right. Question number 2. Who is a go-to musical artist or group for you?
Hmm. That's a kind of a hard question because I love so much different music and I kind
Yeah.
of choose my musical preferences. Um, I don't know.
Well, who's somebody you really enjoy listening to?
Um, I love classics. I love oldies music.
Uh-huh.
Um, I don't know. I can't just name one person. Next
Fair
question.
enough. Fair enough. So it's a wide palette that Eve has. Okay, that's good. Question number 3. What movie can you watch over and over again and it never gets old?
Mm, that's another hard question. I'm not a huge movie person.
Okay.
I enjoy them, but I don't know if there's just one that I really love.
Is there one that you really like?
Yes, there are plenty that I really um
Throw me one. Throw me one title.
okay, let's see. I'm trying to think of something. I like Woody Allen movies.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I think they're
That
witty and funny and I would watch them, multiple times.
Well, there we go. Shout out to Woody Allen. How about that? All right. Question number 4. And I'm sure you do this a lot for your job, but what is the last thing that you read?
The last thing that I read, well, um, I mean, I'm reading something right now, but it's what you've already finished reading.
Either or. Or what are you reading right now? Yeah.
I'm actually reading a book called Eve, and it's about the evolution of female body traits. So it takes
Okay.
a historic look at how different things evolved, like women's ability to see or their ability to form babies in a placenta. It's a fascinating book.
Okay.
It's a little of a strange topic,
Yeah.
but I really like it.
Well, that's all
Uh,
that matters. All right. Question number 5. What's your favorite pizza topping?
Mushrooms.
Oh, the right answer. The right answer, everybody. Number 6. Laying on the beach or going for a hike?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Um, mm,
Sometimes people that say that will say, I'll go for a hike to the beach and then lay down.
okay, that's
I've had
my.
there we go. Okay. Number 7. You have invited me over for dinner. What are you making?
Are you a vegetarian or not?
I will eat anything.
Okay, then I'm probably gonna make you a slow cooked meat stew type of dish with a lot
Mm,
of vegetables on the side that I got from the farmer's market.
perfect. Sounds delicious. You've traveled a lot, so this I'm curious to hear your answer for this question. Number 8. What is a dream vacation destination?
Hmm. I loved Japan and I want to back to Japan in a heartbeat. I want to go back to China in a heartbeat. I want to go to Taiwan. So I think South Korea. So I think anywhere in Asia.
Okay. Okay. I haven't been to any of those places yet, but I've had multiple guests sing the praises of Japan. So it sounds like I definitely need to get there at some point.
Yeah, it's a wonderful place to be.
Okay. Question number 9. What's something you're afraid of?
Mm, I think, the fact that life is so short and impermanent and temporary, um, is hard to grapple with, and that everything that I know and love will be gone one day, and that scares me.
Yeah. Understood. Understood. And your last question. What job, other than one that you've had, would you love to have?
Hmm. I think one day I'd like to be a teacher as well. I'd like to maybe be a professor.
I think you do well. Just from this conversation today, I think you do well.
Yeah.
Eve, thank you so much for coming on the show. This is a fascinating topic, and I hope I know that a lot of my listeners will be interested in hearing your story and the work that you're doing. Just given a lot of the circles of people that I run around with, so to speak, a lot of people based in agriculture, a lot of people that have a love for nature and understand this bigger picture that you guys are trying to get us to all understand. So thank you so much again. I said it before, but I'm gonna say it again for the work that you're doing and your colleagues are doing to keep this planet spinning in a good way. And I'll link all of Eve's stuff in the show notes down below. Of course, check it out. Interact on social media with these groups as well. Follow along as they're doing the great work that they're doing. And I hope to maybe down the road, we'll have you back on and you'll be able to sing praises about how great all of these projects that you were working on turned out. And you'd just love to hear the success stories, right, from all this hard work that you guys are doing. But Eve, thank you so much for coming on the show, and I do look forward to talking with you at some point in the future.
Oh, thank you, Doug. This has been so fun. My pleasure.
Thanks. Thank you for listening to Doug's Front Porch, a conversational podcast with your host, Doug Maidenford. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. 5 stars only, please. Follow along on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just look for Doug's Front Porch. Also, please feel free to tell all of your friends about the show, and I'll see you all next time on my front porch.